Right. Well, I think we are live now. I am testing actually the live feature because tomorrow I'm planning on using it in an interview if I can figure it out. It's been a while since I've done the live feature, so it looks like it's working. I'm on my phone right now looking at YouTube and it's coming up. And so I never announced it. I know this is more of a test than anything else, but if you are online and you happen to see the live stream and you know people that might want to participate, let them know, and maybe we can get to some questions at the end or something. We'll start here with a video that just came out yesterday afternoon. I guess it was recorded in the morning from the Village Church in Texas. I want to talk about this because it's being talked about a lot of places, and I think there are some implications or some things that we can draw from it. So this is Matt Chandler, who is the pastor of the Village Church, no stranger to the Conversations That Matter podcast, because that's not Matt Chandler. That's Dr. Russell Fuller. We'll talk about him later, but let's see if I can get there. Matt Chandler. This is, and you can see even where I stopped this video, the worried look on his face. It's sad. There's so many different emotions because for those who have been a subscriber to the Conversations That Matter podcast, you've heard me talk about Matt Chandler before. And we've talked about really how woke he is mostly. I mean, even in the book, Christianity and Social Justice, that I wrote last year, I use him as an example, I think at least once, but I think twice, as someone who just really has pushed this needle, not just to the political left, but to in ways that are heretical theologically. He's added to the gospel. He has practiced really what amounts to his own form of partiality at his church. He has his ethics have been off. He has misdiagnosed social ills because he's reading them through this standpoint epistemology lens that he thinks gives him special privilege. We've talked about him many times. There's been many examples out there, and here he is, and it's just sad. I think partially for me because I've seen all of this. It's like a train that you know is going to go off a cliff, and it's sad when it finally does. And this may be that moment. I'm not sure, but he was instrumental, I know, in the lives of many of my friends. Not so much myself. I really didn't listen to Matt Chandler. I never actually cared for Matt Chandler personally. People probably wonder, John, who do you like? You always talk about these people. You say like, well, I never really was into that. It's partially true. I'll tell you, like John MacArthur. I listened to John MacArthur. I always liked John MacArthur. Still like listening to John MacArthur because it's just so informative and biblical. On social stuff, there's a lot of Doug Wilson stuff that I read over the years and appreciated on political matters and social matters. I haven't really read his theology stuff, but I'm trying to think who else that I've really been touched by that I can still say, I glean from. I like Mike Abendroff's stuff, No Compromise Radio. I'll listen to his podcast now and then, but that's more of a new thing. Dr. James White, I listen to a lot of, probably almost more than anyone else. Dr. James White, and then before him, Todd Friel. I listen to so much of that. So it's not like I just want to let people know, it's not like I'm critical in like, hypercritical in a way that I have just never listened to anyone because they're never good enough. That's not true at all. I'm actually willing to listen to a lot of people. Matt Chandler, though, isn't just another guy. A lot of these woke guys happen to be guys that even before people knew they were woke, I wasn't that into them. For whatever reason, Matt Chandler's one of them. But I had a lot of friends, and I think he did actually had a positive influence in some of their lives because he was the one that made them realize more often than not, this was the doctrines of grace. Reformed theology, they understood better predestination and election, all of that. And Matt Chandler was the guy that helped with that. And some of my friends who were into Matt Chandler, I think, were used to a style of preaching that I wasn't as used to because they were in more charismatic churches, and Matt Chandler just appealed to that. He was able to kind of bridge that gap. And so I've actually looked at him before he went woke. I looked at him pretty positively, though I wasn't really that into his preaching. I thought, well, he's a good influence on my friends and people I know. And to see him go from that and being known for that to now kind of being known for being woke, and now just his reputation is changing now to one of corruption, mishandling sex abuse cases, all of that. and I don't want to get into all the details of previous things, but let's play this video, and then we'll bring in what we need to bring in to comment on it and to analyze it. But I'm going to just push the play button here, and if we have to stop it, we'll stop it. But we're going to listen to Matt Chandler, and then I believe it's another pastor from the Village Church is going to get up and try to explain what Matt Chandler says. It's very confusing. It's almost like an HR worker, analyst, someone that was using focus groups maybe to come up with the best words to use and how to phrase things, came up with this statement, because it's just so diplomatic, but it's just, you don't know what was said. A lot of emotions are communicated, but not a lot of facts. Here we go.
Father, I love these people. Thank you for giving them to me and me to them.
I think I started at the wrong place. Let's start at the beginning here of this. Here we go.
It's harder seeing you. Several months ago, a woman approached me outside here in the foyer. She had some concerns for how I was DMing on Instagram with a friend of hers. I didn't think I had done anything wrong in that. My wife knew that. Her husband knew that. And yet there were a couple of things that she said that were disorienting to me. And so I immediately came in the room. I found Chairman of the Elder Board, Jason Swords, found Josh Patterson, other lead pastor, and said, this is what this person just told me. And then I went home. Lauren wasn't with me that night. I told Lauren, this is what was said to me tonight. From there, the elders began to look into, because that's what they're supposed to do. Because we cannot be a church where anyone is above the scriptures and above the high heavenly call into Christ Jesus. And so they looked into the conversation between me and this other woman, and they had some concerns. And those concerns were not that our messaging was romantic or sexual. It was that our conversations were unguarded and unwise. And because I don't ever want there to be secrets between us, the concerns were really about frequency and familiarity. We believe in brother-sister relationships here. And yet there was a frequency that moved past that, and there was a familiarity that played itself out in coarse and foolish joking. It's unbefitting.
Okay, so this is, I think, where a lot of the confusion's coming in. Disorienting is the word that you're going to hear again from the pastor who comes up to kind of re-explain what Matt Chandler's trying to explain here. And he says to the congregation, I know you're disoriented. Matt Chandler says, I was disoriented. This lady came and shared information, but we don't really know what that information is other than it went past a brother-sister relationship. But somehow it's not romantic or sexual, but it went past a brother-sister relationship in its familiarity and frequency. I don't know what to make of that either. And it's very hard to say, and I don't want to say anything that's speculation, because that's not really the role that I have, and it's not right, I think, to speculate on things that it could turn into gossip very easily when you start trying to fill in all those gaps and say this is what it was when you don't know. I don't know. But it definitely opens Matt Chandler up to a lot of questions, and they don't want to say who it was, what it was, but I think this ultimately what this ends up doing, especially with someone like Matt Chandler, who has a ministry or he has a platform that's so large, so many people listen to him outside his church. What this is going to end up doing is creating a bigger problem for them, because when they're going to have to clarify the clarification, and then they're going to have to probably clarify the clarification of the clarification, where, and you just end up getting kind of buried in all these details and these nuances, but they're vague. And eventually a narrative just kind of settles in. That's been my experience, at least. People just eventually draw conclusions. So on something like this, I'll show you the conclusions people are already starting to draw online. They're not probably all correct about what actually is going on, but it leaves me wondering whether or not this could have been something really innocuous and just, okay, so this really wasn't that big of a deal. Both spouses knew that you were friends and you just had a friendship, but someone had a problem with it. Probably, see again, speculation, threatened to maybe whistleblow. I don't know, but said something disorienting, whatever that means to Matt Chandler. It seems that it disturbed him enough. You can see his face is very disturbed, that he felt like he had to say something to the whole entire congregation and also to the internet. This wasn't a members meeting. Remember that. This wasn't a meeting where just members came together and he talked it out without the live stream. He decided to do this to the entire world, or at least where the entire world could have access to it. Anyone who streams his sermons, listens to his sermons, this is what they're getting. Or not Acts 29, Village Church sermons. So this was all strategically planned out. This isn't something that was, I think, a knee-jerk reaction. They're choosing their words wisely, and they're doing it in this public forum for a reason. And whatever was said to him, it was heavy enough, disturbing enough, that he had to go public with it. So you have on the one end, you think this must be really bad and they're just trying to hide the details. On the other end, you think, or the other possibility is this is really innocuous, but they're afraid of it just getting twisted. But he's not saying that it's being twisted. So you have two opposite extremes. People are, and I understand why, they're tending to veer towards it's a lot worse, but they're just not telling you. And if it really is innocuous, then and just not really a threat. It wasn't really a problem, but the fear was that someone could twist it, make it seem like it was something that it wasn't. Then I don't think they would handle it this way. But if that is the case and that's how they're handling it, it's incredibly short-sighted, in my opinion. It makes no sense to do this. And so I'll give you the motives that I think could be possibly playing into this, the potential motives at the end. But this is where the confusion starts coming in, right when his opening, right? What you just heard, I think, is the most confusing part.
Of someone in my position as a lead pastor and as an elder, I'm held to a higher standard and fell short of that higher standard. So the elders have decided, and I think they're right, that my inability to see what I was in probably has revealing some unhealth in me. And I don't know if that's tied to the pace I run or the difficulty of the last 6-7 years, but I agree with them. And so in their grace to me and my family, they've decided, and again, I think they're right, to put me on a leave of absence, starting immediately from preaching and teaching at the Village Church. If I'm on, I'm just really embarrassed. Feel stupid. Thank you. Feel dumb. Feel like I'm embarrassing my wife and kids. Putting a ton of pressure on our staff. I feel like I've fallen short for you. And you might even be hearing, you might not be a Christian, you might be hearing me saying this like, what the H? But the Word of God holds me to a certain standard, and I need to live into that, and I fell short, and man, I'm apologizing to my family, to you, to all involved in this situation, and some things I love. I love that our elders engaged at the level they did. You know how easy this would have been to make it nothing and just let me not address whatever this is? Super grateful that the elders have loved us and walked with us the way that they have. Super grateful for you. I'm super hopeful for what's to come in the future. But I need to breathe, and that's both discipline and development. And so, man, in time, forgive me. I love you. Eager for the other side of this, whatever God has for us. And so let me pray for us, and then Josh will step in.
Now, I think I must have fast-forwarded past the part where he starts this off saying he plans to be the Village Church pastor for 20 years to come. So whatever this is, he doesn't think it's bad enough that he has to permanently step down or he can't pastor there anymore. But he also says it's disqualifying, and he says that a number of times. This is disqualifying. So I want to just read for you. Let's go to Titus chapter 1 and read for you some of the qualifications for being an elder that might pertain to a situation, what we know of this situation, which we don't seem to know much, but we know it has something to do with a inappropriate relationship between a male and female. So it says that in verse, let's see here. Let's go to verse, we'll just start at the beginning here. Man must be above reproach. It's verse 6 of Titus 1. The husband of one wife, one woman man, literally. Having children who believe, not accused of dissipation or rebellion. The overseer must be above reproach as God's steward, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not addicted to wine, not pugnacious, not fond of sordid gain, but hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, just, devout, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word, which is in accordance with the teaching, so that he will be able to both exhort in sound doctrine and be able to refute those who contradict. So don't be rebellious, don't be an empty talker, a deceiver. When you go through this, the thing that stands out to me, obviously, is the one-woman man, and wondering, I think that's what everyone's wondering, if this violates that. But there are other things here that I'm open to. It could be that this coarse jesting he mentioned was not in accordance with the qualification to somewhere in these principles of not being self-willed, quick-tempered, pugnacious, not loving what is good. Somewhere in there, these are more general character traits, and maybe Matt Chandler is saying that's where there's been a violation. That's where I don't meet the standard, because there was these jokes that I told. I don't know how to make sense of the frequency and the familiarity thing, other than the only qualification in here I see is one-woman man. You can't be you cannot be someone who is giving the attention that's meant for your wife to someone else. So I don't know what to say other than it seems like something like that happened, whether it was sexual in nature or whether it was emotional in nature. It was something that his wife deserved from him that he was giving to someone else. That seems like a logical conclusion to draw, but we don't seem to have all the information. But that is what I think people are going to pick up from this, and understandably so. It's a reasonable thing to think that. So now we have the pastor, another pastor from the village church, come up, and he kind of put some meat on the bones. He specifies what this means, taking a leave of absence, not meeting the qualifications.
And lead us in the service.
I'm going to skip past his prayer here.
Yeah, we do. We love him. This is the day that the Lord has made, and we'll rejoice and be glad in it.
That's probably the first scripture that came to his head, but I don't know if that's the one I would have quoted there.
I realize that is disorienting news. It's hard, it's heavy, it's shocking, and really depending on who you are and how you came in and your...
Can I just say one thing? Disorienting. That's what Matt Chandler said. That's what this individual is saying. Disorienting means confusing. It means that you couldn't get your bearings, that you were given information that you just didn't know how to categorize because it was so outside the scope of what you're used to dealing with or what you know and are familiar with. And that word is not, it's a value neutral word in a sense. It doesn't imply that there's the problem could be you, it could be someone else, it doesn't really tell you. It's not specific. So when Matt Chandler uses it about himself, says, well, I was given this disorienting information. It's like, well, he knew what he messaged or DM'd this other woman. So what information would have been brought to him that would have confused him? That's the question. How is this confusing? And no one really knows the answer to that. It's weird. It's weird, but that's the public explanation he wants to give. And I'm just pointing out that that is a very, the word actually probably that should have been used here is disturbing. It's disturbing. I know that was disturbing to you. It is disturbing. It's not that disorienting is much too mild of a term. It's disturbing. It's upsetting. It's disappointing. That's what Matt Chandler probably should have said about himself too. I was disturbed when this individual confronted me and put all of these things together that I just I didn't see what I was doing, and I realized it was sin, it was sin, or it was unwise. You don't hear him saying that though. He uses this language that's so vague and general and is open to interpretation. And to do that is just it's not helpful to not just the congregation, but the people listening online.
Your story and your background and all types of different things, it lands on you specifically in a very personal way as it lands on us generally in a very corporate way. And so I just want to pause to recognize that and tell you that that's okay and that's absolutely normal. This has been a weighty thing. It's been a hard thing. And I pray that the Lord would minister to you as he has to me and to so many of us in this season and in the season to come. What I'm going to try and do now is just come behind what Matt said and offer some further clarity. Because regardless of how that hit you, I trust that clarity is helpful. And so I'm going to read some things here.
You tell me, and you can tell me in the comments whether or not this is clear. Because so far, you're disoriented, you're confused, but they never really give you anything to help you come out of that disorientation, right? So remember when Obama, actually someone in the comments I just noticed mentioned Obama in conjunction with Chandler here. Remember when Obama would say, "Let me be clear," and then everything after that was unclear? That's how this kind of hits me. So here's the meat on the bones. Here's the clarification.
I'm going to try and pace it in such a way that we can hear it. The first thing that I want to do is I do want to thank the individual who brought this to Matt. That's no small thing. It took a ton of courage. It took a ton of conviction. And the way that this person handled that and the fact that this person came forward and had that discussion is really meaningful and really significant, and we're all really grateful for it. And so I do want to say thank you. The concerns were about Matt's use of social media, of one-on-one communication with a woman who was not his wife. As Matt said, he immediately brought those concerns to Jason Swords, who's the chairman of our elder board, and to me immediately that same night, went home and shared it with Lauren. You need to know this, that Matt has wholeheartedly been submissive to the elders as overseers. That's significant. That's important for you to know.
And that is significant. I don't want to say everything here is negative. Let's give credit where credit is due. If that's what he's doing, that's good. That's good that he's submissive to the elders. He's willing to do this and go through this process. But we don't know the circumstances. Was he caught red-handed? Was he blackmailed? We don't know. We don't know any of that. But that is a good thing, that he's not being obstinate, because some people with authority have, and pastors included, have in situations where there actually was sexual immorality, they have been obstinate and they have blocked efforts to keep them accountable. So good for Matt Chandler for doing this.
He's never denied or resisted. There's been times of confusion, a time when we needed to press into clarity. And so what we did in this is we commissioned an outside independent review of his messages. This was conducted by an independent law firm. Matt provided full access to his cell phone, emails, and all technological platforms. He fully cooperated. It's also important for you to know what the report found and what it did not find. The investigators' report led the elders to conclude that Matt did indeed violate our internal social media use policies, and more importantly than that, while the overarching pattern of his life is one of being above reproach, he did fail to meet the 1 Timothy standard.
And okay, I was reading from Titus. We could have gone to First Timothy too, though. What's the standard then? The only thing that keeps coming to mind is the one woman man stuff. I mean, like I said, I'm open to, is it something else? Is it not? Is it the coarse jesting that's part of it? But it's hard now because he's saying it has something to do with communicating to a woman who wasn't his wife. That's what we're left with now. It's so hard not to draw the conclusion that there was something inappropriate here, that just something that he should have given to his wife, a familiarity he should have had with his wife, the kind of, and you can't tell me that doesn't really flow into romance, because it's so easily, I don't see, I can't separate the two in my mind, at least. It's very difficult. You have a woman who's not your wife, who's not family, we'll say, which doesn't sound like this is family. This is someone who's the wife of someone else in your church, and you have familiarity and frequency. So you know each other, and you're willing to say things that are risky on some level. So coarse jesting is, that's risky behavior for a pastor to engage in privately with someone who's anyone, but someone who's not their wife. There's a comfortability that they've established with one another, a trust that's been built of some kind. So at the very least, I don't know how to separate that thing, whatever that is, from romance, from you may not be going to a nice Italian restaurant and having music played as someone's grating your cheese or something, but you are developing a relationship where the easiest way to say it is what you would normally have with your wife is you're having with someone else, and that it's a marriage that lacks the intimacy that's normally associated with a marriage physically, but the other things, the other elements are there. So that if it wasn't immoral in a physical way, emotional affair is the word that keeps coming to mind. So let's just assume that is a possibility, a strong possibility. If it's violating, the one woman man, that it means there was another woman. How else do you read it? It's just, they're not saying it though, but it's like with all the pieces, how do you not draw that conclusion? I don't know how not to. And I understand why people do it. I'm so open to it being another disqualification from First Timothy or Titus, but it's not looking good.
For an elder being above reproach here in this instance. As Matt said, we're strong proponents of brothers and sister relationships. We believe in those because we believe the scriptures affirm those. It matters to us to fight for that in the best kind of way. But there are boundaries around what's appropriate in these kinds of friendships, and a pastoral role requires greater awareness of those boundaries. In this case, the frequency and the familiarity of the messages crossed a line. They revealed that Matt did not use language appropriate for a pastor, and he did not model a behavior that we expect and that you expect a leader of our church to have. But I want to be clear that the elders believe that this behavior was not disqualifying of an elder, and it did not rise to a level that would warrant more severe discipline.
I don't know what to say. It wasn't disqualifying, but he's disqualified. This is the guy who's supposed to be making it clear. And we start off with, he did not meet the standards of 1 Timothy. He was not above reproach. He didn't have a brother-sister relationship. It was past that. It was in violation of the biblical qualifications. And yet, now we hear, well, there's nothing disqualifying. Now, maybe what he meant is permanently disqualifying. In other words, there's a restoration process. But I wish he would have said it. That's not what he said. He said, there's nothing disqualifying here. So now you're left with more confusion. And we'll talk about, I know people in the comments section are talking about this law firm. We'll talk about that in a moment.
The investigators of the report concluded that this was not a romantic relationship, and it was not a sexual relationship. That's important. The report also confirmed this kind of direct messaging communication was a unique case. There were no other examples like it. The woman who Matt was messaging with did not request the independent investigation, but she did cooperate with the investigators and shared messages with them. We're thankful for that. We're trying to keep certain information confidential because we do want to honor her desire not to be in the spotlight. It's also important for you to know that she's certainly free to speak if and when she chooses to do so. So while the elders believe that this did not rise to the level of disqualification, we do hold elders to a higher standard because the scriptures hold elders to a higher standard. Matt's leave of absence is both disciplinary and developmental, which allows him time to focus on growing greater awareness in this area. He needs it. How long will that time be? The elders have laid out some expectations for Matt and will dictate the timeline for his return to the pulpit. The health of our church is our top priority, and we're committed to assisting and development for care for everyone involved, including Matt. Our desire is to create time and space for Matt to be able to focus on his development. He's not going to be doing that alone. It's in cooperation and in collaboration. We want to pull him in to be shepherded, to be cared for, and not to push him away. Matt desires this as well. And Lauren, you know this. We love you, and our aim is to continue to care for you and your family in all of this. Church, I hope that you know this, that we're blessed with a strong team of pastors, ministers, and staff members. They have shouldered a lot, and they will shoulder a lot, and we will continue forward in this season. If I look around and think about what the Lord is doing in us and among us, there's no doubt that Matt's presence in the pulpit is strong, and the Lord speaks mightily through him. He is not the only man here. And our church family has been blessed, supported, encouraged, lifted up, ministered to by dozens and dozens of other leaders, and that's going to continue. We'll walk through this season together. I know you have questions. I know you need to process. You should have questions. You will need to process. That's normal, that's expected. Let me give you some pathways for processing and questions. We always want to point you to our care department. We have a care email. If you have questions, comments, concerns, and you're not quite sure who to go to, this is a place that any...
All right, we're going to stop right here. Okay, so I'm more confused and more disoriented. Now, there is a couple of good things about this, I want to say. I think he struck some right notes as far as that they want to shepherd Matt. They want to be a support for the family. Although it was a little weird when he looked at Lauren and said, I don't know, they're trying to keep kind of everyone out of it, but obviously something's there with the family. Who knows what that is? Maybe the wife isn't exactly happy with this, or they're just very emotionally disturbed. I don't know, but I would assume that it would be disturbed. I'd be disturbed. But he does strike some right notes as far as trying to emphasize the plurality of elders that they have, and that this can be handled. The confusing part again is just, though, he's disqualified, but he's not disqualified. There's totally different narratives that are attempting to be interwoven with one another here that I just don't think you can reconcile. Like, which one is it? If he's not disqualified, then what are you doing? If he is disqualified, then what are you doing? It's like either way, there's a middle ground that's being treaded. And again, this was not something they did at a members meeting. This is something they're doing for the whole world to see. And that's also, I think, maybe it makes more sense if you're at the Village Church. Maybe if you're from the Village Church, I doubt there's many people left at the Village Church listening to this podcast. There was at one time, I think there was people who came out of the Village Church who would share things with me about how terribly woke it was becoming, anti-police and the whole rest of it. But I don't know if there's anyone still there who would be listening to it. But if there is, maybe clarify for us. Maybe someone from the Village Church can say, this is why it made sense to us if it did, and not to other people listening. The reaction to this, though, is somewhat predictable. Let me show you that. So here are some of the, I'll erase myself so you can see. I just looked last night when I first heard about this. I was actually at the county fair. I'll tell you about that a little later. I had actually a pretty good weekend, but this was the reaction I saw just on Twitter. I just wanted to see what are the top tweets, and Twitter's not the only place. Twitter tends to be more of a leftist dominated echo chamber in my mind. So this is like how the left probably is going to treat this more, in my opinion, if these are the popular tweets that were going around. But this is what they were. You had Boz Tavidian, who really big with the caring well stuff in the SBC. He said, after listening to this statement to the congregation, my educated guess is that there's much more to the story, not in a good way. Time has a way of bringing forth the whole truth. Oh, and at the 27-30 minute mark, you can hear the congregation applause for him. I've been told they also gave him a standing ovation. So gross. And I have to say, I don't know. I don't really disagree with him so much. It's kind of, I don't know if I think it's as gross as he thinks it is, but it's weird. I would say weird rather than gross. It's like I feel I'm disoriented. I feel like I need more information. Then you have Jonah Harris. Now, I don't know who Jonah Harris is. We're not related, as far as I know. Maybe we are, and I don't know it. But there's a major issue with Matt Chandler not publicly apologizing that he put that woman in an extremely inappropriate position. He had power, position, and authority. Here we go. You start hearing the Me Too stuff coming out. He had power, position, and authority, and she didn't. So this is what he did: sliding into her DMs. That's what he did. He slid into her DMs. Like, we don't have any information about it. We don't know what happened. In a way that was concerning enough that he was confronted in the church lobby. This apology centered himself and completely erased the damage done to this woman on the other side of the exchange. Well, we don't know what damage was done exactly because we don't know what happened. It's just, so there's a lot of assumptions behind this. This is not adequate, and I know many will say, you will never be satisfied with anything he says. This is not true. As a sister in Christ, it's imperative that we hold our leaders accountable to modeling true repentance. I hope he and his family find healing it through radical transparency. I want to focus on this in a moment. This is where the law firm comes in. This is the tie to what's happening in the SBC and waiving attorney-client privilege. This is the part of the Me Too movement that is destroying organizations and churches included in this. All right, but I'm thinking about the woman and her friend who did a very scary thing, confronting a very powerful man. Side note, him being disoriented better not have led him to being a jerk outside the lines of narcissistic zero to the friend in the lobby. She's playing on something Matt Chandler said that was very harsh, I think a few years ago, where he talks about people who criticize Village Church and do it anonymously being narcissistic zeros. So that's what that reference is. But this whole thread is loaded with assumptions of things we just don't know. We can't possibly know. I don't know whether he slid into her DMs. I don't know. She might have been the initiator. Who knows? I don't know exactly what took place here. But the woman and her friend did a very scary thing. I don't know if the woman did or not. It sounds like her friend was the one that had the problem. We don't have any evidence that the woman in this case had any problem. So there's all these assumptions, and all the assumptions point towards one thing. Matt Chandler is guilty. Why? Because he has power. He is the one with a position of authority. Therefore, he has to be the guilty one. And it's so narrow, this narrative, it does not allow for the idea that there might be complicity with this woman. There might be complicity with people who don't have the same positions of power, quote unquote. And really the power they're talking about is institutional power, positions in organizations, that kind of thing. So people can have power, by the way, and not have an organizational institution. So there's so many flawed assumptions to this. One of the things, though, she says is through radical transparency. How can he make good? How can he get into the good graces of the Me Too people? Radical transparency. So you have Matt Chandler handing his phone over, and this law firm comes in and investigates and looks through all this. I don't know anything about this law firm. I don't know who it was, what it was, but that is now, I think, a new standard that is being set right in front of our eyes. Just so you know, Guidepost has to come in, and we have to waive attorney-client privilege if we're in the executive committee of the SBC and let them see everything and let lawyers comb through everything. And that now is the new standard for what true repentance looks like, or true, I don't even know, because sometimes the people that are doing this don't say they have anything to repent for, but it's like it's to absolve themselves or something, to make themselves look spiritually having the higher ground. They hire these firms, often secular, to come in, and then they come clean with everything, and they are submitting themselves to another standard. Generally, it's another group that might be biblical, might be not. I would say mostly probably not. Guidepost certainly wasn't. But they're going to come in and they're going to evaluate and make sure that you're actually above board, that you pass the test. And I think the deception here is Christians think that they can pass the test. They think that if they do this kind of thing, I'm speaking broadly, not just about Matt Chandler, I'm saying that they think that this is the pathway, and that they'll be able to somehow, their good name won't be tarnished. They'll be able to retrieve it from the abyss. They'll be able to show how good they are, because after all, they were willing to go through this. I'm telling you though, these reactions, this is a very popular one on Twitter right now, and I don't even know who Jonah Harris is, but these reactions are showing why this isn't possible, because what she's saying is he hasn't done the radical transparency. He's given his cell phone over to a law firm, but he still hasn't done the radical transparency thing, because he hasn't come clean with all the details to everyone else. And I'll admit that there's a tension in their narrative, and details would help maybe alleviate that, but that's because their narrative, they're trying to do two things at once. He's guilty, he's not guilty, or he's qualified, he's not qualified. That's the problem with their narrative. But I'd say most situations, you don't want to come clean with every detail. If there was a sexual sin, do you want that person, let's say, coming forward with every single detail? And now let me read for you what was sexted to me on this. Like, no, obviously not. It's enough to know this violated scripture. I was in sexual sin. I repent. What I did was, it's my fault. I'm guilty. And you don't have to have all the intimate details of that, nor it's shameful to speak about the things that are done by them in secret. You don't need all that. But you do need at least enough. And so they're not giving you enough, but yet the law firm here gets access to the entire phone. And I'm wondering if this is going to be moving forward, if this is the new standard. I think it is. I think that's what's forming right in front of us. That anytime there's even an accusation, it doesn't have to be a true accusation. There's just the possibility that something might have happened. Well, show everyone your underwear drawer. I mean, open everything up to them for an investigation. Make sure it's the secular authorities too that come in, and they are invited in. It's not like a police investigation where you have to comply because there's a criminal issue or something. No, it's even the most minute things. You pay the money, you finance this for these secular organizations to come in. And this, they talk a lot about the elders being in charge, and this is an elder-run church and stuff. But over spiritual things, the elders have authority, but it's not the elders that are. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to get out people who know how to find things that could be erased in your history browser or something. I'm not saying it's wrong to use these things as tools necessarily. I'm just concerned what's happening is there's a seeding of spiritual authority. It's going from elders to lawyers, which is scary, or to the quote-unquote experts, the psychological experts or something. And I'm seeing just more and more examples that would lead me to believe that would support that kind of a thing. And this is just one of them in my mind. Who's the real authority here? Is it the elders, or is there a part of this that is being ceded to lawyers? The people at the church don't get to know, or we don't get to know all what's going on, but the lawyers can look through the cell phone. And what happens in the future if this is the standard, when they're looking through your cell phone and they find all kinds of politically incorrect things that don't jive? But they can get all that information from your social media, the messages you've given to others. I mean, sounds like they comb through all his messages to see if he was doing this with other people as well. So, and he's a guy that seems like he's coming clean to some extent, at least. He's coming clean with the elders, even though we don't know, but it seems like the elders are aware of the situation. So it's like, why do you need that outside firm? It's the whole thing. There's just so many question marks that arise in this whole thing. And so people are lighting up the chat right now and giving their 2 cents. Please leave your comments, leave your opinions about this. Maybe you see something I don't see, but I see a danger in this. I see a danger in making this the new standard. Okay, here's another reaction to this by Sheila Grigori. She says, "Can I just say I'm glad that Matt Chandler has taken a leave of absence for an inappropriate texting relationship with another woman, and the elders board has taken it seriously. However, I would have rather seen him step back after spiritually abusing Karen Hinckley. When Hinckley wanted to divorce her husband and also had been using child sexual abuse, who had been using these child sexual abuse materials, during their marriage, Chandler put her under church discipline. And so I don't know anything about this situation, really. Maybe I did at one point, I forgot. But she's bringing that up. She's also bringing up, I also would have preferred that he put he was put under discipline for callousness, shown to an 11-year-old victim of sexual assault, which that went before a grand jury, that situation, and there wasn't anything found, to my knowledge. There's been more than one though. They fired a guy. I think it was Anthony something. I think Anthony was his first name, and he went and he worked for. Now I'm blanking on it. I want to say Cedarville, and where I can't remember his full name, but anyway, there was a guy that they had on staff that they had fired, but they didn't give the full details of what this guy had actually been doing, and that created a whole problem. So there's other things you could probably add to this list of like. And I don't know if all of these are representations of actual mishandling. This could be the left applying a standard that's just not biblical. But I know there have been some legitimate things in the past, at least one where there was a mishandling. And I keep thinking about how the saints are going to judge the world. Just be careful about. Let's apply the biblical standard, and let's just be clear: was it violated or not? All right? Is there a disqualification here or not? That seems like a pretty cut and dry thing in my mind. The Bible is pretty clear on it. We just read from Titus. Bringing in the lawyers, bringing in all the other authorities, the psychologists or whoever the authorities in the world are supposed to be, that is the Trojan horse that I see that I might be looking back 10 years from now and saying, oh yeah, I remember this was one of those examples of how we got here. This saints will judge the world, but we're letting the world judge the saints. Who knows? That's the situation, though, at the Village Church right now, and there's more questions than answers, but I don't see how, with the left, which is the group that Matt Chandler has appealed to with all his quote-unquote racial justice stuff, I don't see how they are going to accept him anymore. I think this might be the kill shot, to be honest with you. You can't violate any... So there was a while, and we're still maybe at the tail end of it, where you could kind of be woke, and you could violate some of the sexual... the LGBT stuff, because there is a pass kind of given to pastors where it's like, well, we know in your private religious institutions, you don't believe in same-sex marriage or something like this. But as long as you're okay with it being out there, right? This was the Gospel Coalition article I talked about last week. It's like, we have to accept it out there. So they have rights too, but just, we won't marry them in our church, that kind of thing, right? So there was kind of this pass given to pastors, like that pass is temporary at best. So we may still, in some ways, the woke even may extend a pass to pastors. Like, well, we know that the Bible says this, but you have to go halfway with us at least. At least, be sensitive to LGBT people by making sure that you let them know that they can have these desires, they just can't act on them or something like that. So put that issue on the shelf. That's still in a transition. But the Me Too and the BLM stuff, you could be whole hog on one of them and say, man, I'm total BLM. If you violate Me Too, it doesn't matter what you've done for BLM in the eyes of the left. And vice versa. You could be whole hog Me Too and violate BLM and say, I just don't see the systemic abuse with the police or the way our history is taught or whatever, and you're done. And I think that's what is going to happen and is happening with Matt Chandler. It's like he can be as woke as he wants to be on race-related issues. He's never going to gain their favor. Maybe a few people here and there who are personal friends, but I think he's done as far as that goes. So let that be a lesson to everyone who wants to be woke out there, that you cannot satisfy them. The slightest violation is going to do this. Other things, let's see. Okay, so that's Matt Chandler. I wanted to transition here. There's a bunch of things I have on the list, and I didn't know how far we'd get, but let's talk about this. This is Acts 29. This is an Acts 29 church. This doesn't reflect on, just so people know, international organization Acts 29, which is the church planting network that Matt Chandler happens to be the head of. And I wonder if he's stepping down from that. I would assume so, if he's stepping down from being a pastor for a while. But this is a church that was planted, but that is sponsored somehow by Acts 29. So Matt Chandler's organization. Doesn't mean Matt Chandler approves of this necessarily, but it's happening in the organization. And I know people, by the way, multiple people from Acts 29 who've told me, it's bad, John. It's bad. It's woke. For years I've heard this. And I think I haven't done, oh, wow, Matt Chandler's trending on Twitter right now. Okay. I haven't done a deep dive into Acts 29. Maybe I should. I've just assumed I've done enough on Matt Chandler that people know, like, hey, if he's the head, don't get involved with Acts 29. That's probably, doesn't mean that every church they planted was bad or anything, but it's just, that's not the organization you want to be part of. So people who were involved and left because of those social justice related reasons, it'd be good to hear from you. I have heard from a few of you, but maybe this is something that needs to happen. Maybe we do need to talk about this more. Here is what an Acts 29 church in Australia had to say. A pastor at one of these churches had to say, and I'm going to play it for you here.
Can and must lean into the rights of those who identify as transgender. The Christian philosopher Edith Stein explains, whoever is near us and needing us must be our neighbor. The love of Christ knows no limits. It never ends. So if that means advocating for better health care and social support, if that means creating space for gender-inclusive bathrooms and policies that acknowledge a person's humanity and their inherent value, if that does mean thinking through complex questions around sport or the particular and unique struggles that the trans community face when it comes to healthcare and domestic violence and homelessness, Christians can and must lean into the rights.
Okay, all right. So we listened to the clip, and Woke Preacher Clips goes on and gives you a bunch of other clips. I think this is the that's the main one, though. I mean, there's a bunch of them here, man. It just keeps going on and on. I mean, this is crazy. Okay, so this is a church that Acts 29 planted, and people have wondered, is Acts 29 solid? Just because Matt Chandler's running it, that doesn't necessarily mean it's woke, right? Well, here's the question. Are they going to be kicked out of the Acts 29 network for this? That's the question. And now that this has been exposed, Woke Preacher Clips, I think might have been the original one to expose this, I'm not sure, but if this is exposed, if it's known, if this is public, are they going to be kicked out of the network? That's the big question. That's the question I ask about any denominational organization that you're part of that's Christian. When the violation happens of the doctrine, biblical fidelity, or this basic stuff right here, does that person or or church or whatever, is that affiliation broken? Because it should be. This is totally anti-biblical right now, and it's crazy. I don't even need to comment much on this. Obviously, there's two genders. The Bible assumes that there's two genders, and his whole example of, because he doesn't quite go to, well, we need to affirm transgenderism. What he's taking a different road, a road of, well, we need to affirm their rights, their human rights. So he's in playing upon your kind of your liberal sensibilities, that you don't want people to be denied healthcare, do you? You don't want them to have a barrier in front of them when they want to compete in sports or go to the restroom or those kinds of things. And he calls it denying their humanity. That's not denying their humanity. Look, if you're a man and you want to go into the female restroom or something, actually it would be an affirmation of that person's identity, their humanity, I guess but their identity, to say you must go into the one that actually the one that God made you to be in, the one that God, be true to the design that God has put in you and made you to be. That would be an affirmation of one's humanity. The denial would be to say that God didn't really design you in that way, and you can just, based upon your experience, based upon what you think you are because of experiences you've had, do whatever you want. So it's the opposite. It's calling good evil and evil good, and there's really no way around it. And guess where it's going in sports? Guess where it's going in sports and all the rest. Now, this is a German website. This is a German article, August 26th. And you don't want me reading German because I can't actually translate it. I will read you an English translation, though. And the headline on this is and this is kind of a rough translation, but what it's like to be a transgender football player. Marjolein, 31 years old, had been living for football since he was a child. But finding a team where she, it says, feels welcome, where her participation does not go against the rules of the KNVB, is not easy, which I guess is their league there for soccer. We would call it soccer in the United States, football internationally. The alarm clock of Majorlein, 31, goes off every morning except on Sundays at 3 o'clock. An hour later, she is in the bakery where the facade still shows the boy's name that she received at birth. Customers are now used to the new Marjolein, or rather the Marjolein that she always was. Marjolein that she always was, but of whom she has long thought she had to hide it. 2 years ago, she went into transition and finally got the coveted V in her passport, which I guess female in her passport. In the stores, she handed out birth announcemements. That year, she was also registered as a woman. It was icing on the cake. Football is everywhere for Marjolein. So here's where you have the problem of assuming that gender is just a social construct. Here's the question. Why does she feel the need that she has to go make an announcement publicly? Why does she have to change her passport? If it's just this internal decision that she should be fine with internally, then none of that stuff should matter. She's not losing out on anything, but she has to do it because it's a social construct. She needs societal recognition now. And it's society that was keeping her back, but her experiences have let her, the pronoun the article's using is her, they've let her, it's a he, okay, it's a he. So I feel confusion myself reading an article like this because I start using the pronouns they're using. It's not right though. It's a he. We're talking about a biological man, and you don't figure it out until like the second paragraph. That's who you're talking about. He was born a man, and through experiences, through understanding more, his role in relationship to society, whatever the case was, figured out actually he is a she, and now society must recognize that fact. And so that's the whole thing. And part of society recognizing that fact is he wants to compete with girls in football. But it's not just girls his age. Let me read for you. Marjolein has not played football for 16 years, not only because she, it says, has a lot of pain in her hips, possibly a result of the administration of female hormones. Great. But especially because the league does not allow her to play in a team that otherwise only consists of girls younger than 20. He's 31. My passport says I'm 31 years old, but I don't feel that way. I'm full of hormones, and I feel like a 15-year-old girl. The league is afraid that I'm too strong to play with and against young girls. That's not the case, and you can't judge that from a chair in Zeist, which I guess is the city where the league is. And so Marjolein invited the Football Association in a letter to come and have a look at a training. You will see that the happiest girl in the world is playing a nice game of football with her team. Of course, I should have come out with this much earlier, but if you live in a village in Draith, that's what you do last. In that same letter, he wrote to understand that it can be confusing to an outsider that the age on her passport, I'm just going to try to substitute pronouns at this point, all right, because I'm getting annoyed. On his passport is different from the age which he identifies. I have the misfortune of being born that way, and of course I should have come out with this much earlier, but take it from me, if you live in the village that he lives in, that's what you do last. So they're bigoted. That's basically the insinuation. Playing in the only women's team of Lys is not an option for Majorlein. So the whole thing is he's being discriminated against. Football is survival, it says. He experiences not playing football as torture. So the psychologist who guides him during his transition recently said that he is on the verge of burnout. Sports can be an important outlet for people in transition from man to woman or vice versa. And so the psychologists now have the moral authority to tell the football league, basically, you're causing torture to this man who's not allowed, 31-year-old man who wants to play with 14-year-old girls. Oh, man. So because this is not about the Premier League, I'm not a good player, he says. All the more surprising was the surprise when a foreign transfer beckoned last year. Until recently, Marjolein drove a car through Westerbork every Saturday to sell freshly baked croissants and other products. On one of those mornings in the moving supermarket, he received a call if I wanted to come and play in Italy, but I don't speak English at all. I've never been outside the Netherlands. He says, for a girl like me, going to Lice, or Lissy, I don't know how you pronounce it, Lice, is quite an undertaking, and I have the bakery, so I didn't do it. And so let's see. Basically, the point of the article is like, not everyone's a bigot because this league in Italy said that he could come play for them in the way that he identifies himself. Well, this is just crazy, obviously. And this is where this whole logic is going. So if you have a church like this Acts 29 sponsored church in Australia that thinks this, caving to this is just part of affirming someone's humanity, then why not do it across age? Why not do it across all kinds of other identities? 31-year-old playing with 14-year-olds. I don't see how that could go wrong, especially when it's a male 31-year-old. And I mean, I can't see how there would be any injuries created by this. I mean, come on. This is insanity. But the root of this is if you start saying that gender is fluid, that it's just a social construct, that it's not actually real, it's not rooted in anything objective, God didn't design, then you're left with this insanity, and it just keeps getting worse. And it leads to harm. It leads to all these things. They're only concerned about one thing in this German article. They're only concerned about the quote-unquote emotional torture that it's causing to this 31-year-old man who can't play with 14-year-old girls. They're not focusing on, what about the 14-year-old girls who are going to be probably injured and certainly out-competed when there's a 31-year-old man competing with them? That's no one cares, right? Because that, you see, is the result of a bigoted society that denies humanity, that is horrible. That's this prejudice. And so you can't have that. So I don't even have the words. It's so insane. But when you have Christians caving to this kind of thing, I mean, if Acts 29 doesn't cut ties with this church, then it is so obvious to me that they're going to end up being complicit in this to some extent, because they're not policing the people who violate their own statement of faith, which this is a clear violation of anything remotely biblical. And then they're the ones that are responsible for giving cover to people introducing the ideology that leads to what we just read. So let's talk about, let's see, there's a couple things. I don't know. How long have we been live streaming here? It's been over an hour, so I think we might wrap it up here pretty soon. Let me just give you a few other things, and we'll go through them briefly here, and then I'll see if we can get to some questions on the old live chat. So, man, I don't know if we have time for this. I had a Two Kingdoms thing I wanted to play from Doug Wilson, where I think he describes Two Kingdoms really well. I don't think we have time for this. No, let's do this, because I think it's in the title. We'll do this. Let's go to Woke Preacher Clips. We're going to talk about... let's talk about this. This is Woke Preacher Clips put out Be the Bridge. Be the Bridge is the study that, remember Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia he had agreed at his church that he was going to go through this study. This is Latasha Morrison, who wrote the book Be the Bridge, and it's all critical race theory. And I did a whole podcast proving this is critical race theory. And it's popular, unfortunately, out there. Well, Woke Preacher Clips showed one of the panel discussions they had and gave some clips from it. And it's pretty insane, but I'll just show you a few. This is woke logic here from Latasha Morrison, and then she has some special guests here. Let's start here.
We just want to, hopefully from this conversation, you can get a deeper understanding of the history of guns and how in a lot of this there's white supremacy behind the increase of gun and gun manufacturing in America, and what can we do about it? How can we be, this is not a podcast against guns at all. A lot of us own guns, but we're talking about making sure that we make healthy decisions about gun ownership. And so we're not going to get into the details of that, but I do believe that military style weapons that any citizen should not have them. This is for protection for our military and also for our police officers when they're outgunned and outmanned when they come into situations. So we may hit on that a little bit because
All right, this isn't a podcast against guns, but hey, I do believe those military style weapons. Okay, AR-15, all right, or something that looks like that, I guess. Citizens should not have those. That's for our military and our police. So we're not against guns, but only military and police should have them. The ones that look scary, military and police should have. Of course, military style weapons, we never, what are you talking about? Are you talking about automatic weapons? Or are you talking about, usually they use this vague language because they do want to ban the AR-15. That's usually what they're going after. And of course, there's a lot of guns that can do what an AR-15 does, a semi-automatic gun. In fact, pistols kill more than any other, pistols that you would get for protection, not military style, quote unquote, scary looking guns, are responsible for the vast majority of gun violence in this country. But they don't talk about generally getting rid of those. They want to focus on certain kinds of guns that could maybe be a deterrent or a defense in the case of the reason for the Second Amendment, government actually getting corrupt. I don't know, maybe raiding your house or sending in IRS agents. Who knows? I mean, this stuff would never happen, right? That's the kind of thing. I'll give you a clip if I have time at the end of some police really beating up on a guy. And I don't know what was the situation, but I just know that if you have a gun, you're less likely to have scenarios like that take place. It's an equalizer. It's the whole purpose of the Second Amendment, right? It's not about hunting. It's not about even home protection. It's about being able to match a government that gets corrupt so the citizens can have their own militia. That's the whole point. But apparently there's white supremacy connected to guns, and guns are, that's why if you go to a gun store, right, they never sell to you if you're a minority, right? They never, unheard of. No, obviously not. Somehow Latasha Morrison must have gotten a gun. She seems to allude to that. So it's, I mean, you talk about conspiracy theory. This, in my mind, this is a conspiracy theory. Where's the white supremacy in gun manufacturing? All right, so here's some more. I don't know how. Look how long this is. Look how many things are said on this podcast. Let's just go through a few of them. So here's more from Latasha Morrison,
African American guy, and he said, I have guns, and I'm willing to lay down, as many guns as they recall, if needed. He said, the only reason why I have guns is because I don't understand why white people are buying so many guns. And he said, I'm going to continue to buy guns. I'm going to continue to buy guns because I don't know what they're preparing for. And so I want to be prepared. What are we preparing for, And he said, but I don't even like guns. And in talking with a lot of African Americans, they feel the same way. And I'm not speaking for all.
This is nuts. What are all the white people buying the guns for? It must be because they're gonna come for us. That's what they're doing. It can't be that maybe they're doing what the founding fathers did, what the Second Amendment was intended for, that they're concerned about this all-powerful federal government that just hired how many thousands of new IRS armed agents and the FBI raiding Trump's home. That kind of thing doesn't factor into it, of course. Or the efforts to ban guns, and so we may not get them again. Let's buy them now. It's got to be some CRT inspired narrative that's put over the whole thing. It's like, no, what they're really doing is we don't have the evidence, we don't have the quotes, we don't have primary sources we can point to, but we have a suspicion that what they're going to do is they're going to come for the black people. So we better buy guns too. We don't like them. We prefer the government just takes them away from all of us. But we better, as long as they're legal, we better have them. Why can't, and here's the thing, why can't someone say, well, I'm looking at what the government does. I'm looking at, my local police department has an armored tank now, armored vehicles. And maybe I don't like guns. Maybe I should just get a gun in case things go south so we can protect ourselves. Why is that not a legitimate reason for getting a gun? Because that's the same logic being employed here, although there's no really real reason for it here. But the idea is well, white people could come and kill us, so we need a gun. It's like, yes, Latasha, that's the kind of, you're getting warmer to the logic that the founders had when it came to an oppressive totalitarian government, and why there was a need for militia, private citizens, to have guns. So I think it's unfounded conspiracy, but it's like, if that's your motive and that's why you want to have a gun, sure, you have a right to get a gun. You can get a gun. You should be able to get a gun. I have no problem with that. Just because you have a kooky reason for getting it, you think the threat that you're thinking about isn't really a threat that seems likely to materialize. Sure, though, you could still get a gun, and there's fine. Let me just read for you some of these quotes, because I don't want to go through them saying them. But let's see. Elizabeth Behrens, a longtime Be the Bridge contributor, talks about the founding of America and paints the Anti-Federalists as all the Southerners obsessively focused on preserving slavery. That is so ignorant. I can't even understand. Why would she say that? Now I'm going to want to listen to the clip, but we don't have time. Abolitionist New York Melancton Smith could not be reached for comment, which is funny. Woke Preacher Clips is saying, well, here's a guy that's obviously wasn't obsessed with preserving slavery. He was an anti-federalist. Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest anti-federalists were in places like New York. So that seems so ridiculous to me. Anyway, I'm going to have to stop this podcast because I've been going too long. But the Second Amendment at its core originally was included to appease the South. It's about white supremacy. Okay, this is stupid. None of this is just fanciful history. This is made up history. That's not why in fact, the NRA, did you know the NRA I believe was a Union veteran that started the NRA. So it's the idea that gun culture is uniquely Southern is not exactly true. It's more rural. It's more, farmers need guns more on a daily basis. And so they're used to them. They're used to having them. They're used to using them. They're not afraid of them. And of course, the South traditionally has been more rural. And the South also has a military tradition going back. So yeah, it's more likely that Southerners are going to be more used to guns, around guns. But look, if you grew up in like Charlotte, North Carolina now, I don't think you're going to be using guns much, probably. I mean, those places now that, especially where Northerners have moved down or urbanites have moved down, they're not the same anymore. But if you live in a rural area, whether North or South, you're going to be used to guns more. And so, yeah, so I have no problem saying, yes, Southerners probably have more guns. They're more used to that, especially in Texas, right? You love your guns. And there's a whole culture of sport, this sport shooting and stuff that is associated with guns. But that does not mean that is not a indicator that I think that's what they're doing. That's probably they're looking at the current reality that, hey, it's people in the South where those camo wearing hunters, and there are more of them down there. They're the ones that, going back, if you go back a long ways, that's where slavery mostly was, because even though it was like the 6% of Southern whites who are rich, or the 15% of families owned slaves, but they were more the rich, well-off families. Let's just make this leap and say that those are their ancestors, and the original reason that their great grandparents had guns was because they just wanted to keep slaves in line. There's really nothing more complicated. I've heard this logic before, and that's the logic. It's not rooted in actual primary source reading of history. The founding generation, whether from Massachusetts or Georgia, they would have all been used to, at that time, when the Constitution was being adopted, they would have all been pro-gun, and they would have all seen in their recent past the defeat of a totalitarian government, or what was approaching that, by the use of citizen militias. And obviously the people in Boston weren't icky about guns. They weren't like, ooh, guns. So it's more of a time and place and culture thing across generations than it is a regional thing. It's more regional now, perhaps, in some ways, but we're going back to 1789, and you cannot, in the late 1700s, then impose presentism as the imposition of modern day realities onto that. Man, I wish I had more time to go over this and we would just kind of talk about it, but I got to go. There's a few other things, just announcements I wanted to make on the podcast that I had in the queue that I just wanted to make you aware of, if I can. One of them is this. YouTube, apparently, someone pointed out, is using the Trevor Project to add context to the video I did with Rosaria Butterfield on and now I don't want to say the word because YouTube's going to ban it, but on change allowing therapy, we'll put it that way. And there's this whole thing about that particular therapy. And someone pointed out, though, on Twitter that, look, the Trevor Project, which YouTube is using to as an organization that has the moral high ground to tell everyone what this therapy is, they apparently are counseling children or offering to children ways to have a quick exit feature on their computer, which erases their browser history to keep their parents in the dark about what they're doing online. Great organization, YouTube, you're using to try to police what Rosaria is saying by appealing to the Trevor Project. That's just rich. And then I wanted to let you know about this, following up to the episode the last episode on John Jasper, the black theologian, who I just said, is really a hero in some ways. I mean, this guy was popular at the time. You have James Riddle, a student or a former student, I guess, at SCBTS, where I went, Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, saying that in the 90s, when Paige Patterson was at SCBTS, in Leroy Fitt's History of Black Baptists, Jasper's mentioned only once. How did he skip Jasper and yammer on so much about Martin Luther King Jr., who was non-Orthodox? That's a tragedy. I never heard Jasper's name once in my homiletics demon seminars when I came back to SCBTS later in 2013. I thought this was interesting. I don't usually post comments here, but I thought it was fascinating that under Paige Patterson, who's supposed this horrible person at the school, they talked about John Jasper, and then when more woke people got in charge, he's erased from history. Because that's what I said. I said, why haven't I heard of this guy? Why is he? Well, apparently there was a time people talked about John Jasper, and now he's not mentioned. Why would that be? I have my ideas on why that might be, but James Riddle letting us know about that, I thought that was fairly interesting. To me, at least. And so let's see. And I just want to let everyone know to remember, sign up for the men's conference, the men's retreat, Adirondack Men's Retreat with Dr. Russell Fuller, October 28th through 30th in Speculator, New York. You mail your check in to Grace Bible Church if you want to come. You sign up online. Just RSVP, let us know you're coming. $176, 5 meals, 2 nights. It'll be a great time. We're going to have an awesome time there. And so I'll let you know about that. And also let you know about Bradford Christian College. I've mentioned it on the podcast before. But if you are looking for a college that is online, that provides mentorship, not just here's the test and take it, but here's someone you can actually talk to. You can ask questions to. They'll meet with you regularly. It's a different kind of model. It's a model that used to be employed that's not as much anymore. But Bradford Christian College might be the option for you. They offer 2 degrees. Bachelor's of Arts in Theological Studies, Bachelor's of Arts in Christian Education. You can take it farther because they're accredited if you want. Transfer it to somewhere else. Might be a good option for homeschoolers. Look into it at least. Ask them questions. They're open to that. And hey, if Biden administration gets their way, then someone else will pay for your education. I'm just kidding. We should all pay for our own educations. That's biblical. But that's BradfordChristianCollege.com is where you're going to go to check that out. And I hope that's helpful for many of you out there who are starting to navigate this, maybe with your high schoolers, and you're wondering, hey, they were the Christian school, homeschool, public school, whatever, but now they're ready for the next step. What do we do? Maybe you want them at home. So that this would be a good option to keep them at home if that's what you want to do, and also at the same time, make sure that they're getting a good education. And so let's just go to the comments section here in the live chat. Look like it's fallen off a little. There were like over 300 people. Now there's 177 that are live chatting still here or in the streaming, and a number of people who have left comments. So let's see if there's any questions in here. Not many. A lot of comments though. They're good comments though. To teach blacks to fight Klansmen. That's why you get, yeah, right. Well, I mean, look, during the Reconstruction period, I think, what was it, the Heller case in Washington, D.C., I think Judge Thomas, who wrote the opinion for that? I'm blanking. In the opinion, though, I want to say Judge Thomas was the one who brought it in. He cited a bunch of historical things, and one of them being that, look, that was one of the ways that black people protected themselves against groups like Klansmen. Was having the right to bear arms. And so, this whole narrative about, it's just white supremacists who want guns, it's so stupid. Yeah, one person's talking about how someone that they knew who didn't like guns came and hung out with them and they shot guns. And by the way, I have stories like this too, where once you shoot and you start realizing this is a tool to use. It's like that speech from the movie Shane, if you've ever seen that, good movie, that a gun is a tool and it's as good or as bad as the man who uses it. And I actually had that experience with someone from Long Island. A friend of mine actually was an atheist. A friend of mine who's an atheist, Jewish kid, actually grew up in Long Island, didn't know anything about guns. And I invited him upstate and we went to the range and he loved it. He just loved it. And now he loves shooting and not afraid of them at all. And that's, I think, a lot of it too. You just got to get over some of the things you've been told about them. And it's like driving a car in some ways. I mean, you get in a car, it's very dangerous. It was scary. You could die in a car accident, right? But you learn to drive and you learn to get over that fear. So, some funny comments in here too. Well, someone pointed out to me that Acts 29 is an affiliate rather than a denomination. Yeah, and I know that. It's not a denomination. It's an organization. And if I said denomination, I was misspeaking. I don't think I did. But yeah, you got to get... That's going to be the test in my mind. If Acts 29 decides they're going to keep a guy or a church that is having saying things about transgenderism that are affirming, then that's the end of it. So one last check here. Did Chandler leave the faith yet? That's so... Yes, as far as I know, Matt Chandler, I've said this before in the podcast, I believe he's a false teacher. I believe that he has added to the gospel, and I put a citation of that in the book Christianity and Social Justice. If you want to go pick that book up by John Harris, you can go to Amazon, but you can also go to worldviewconversation.com, and I talk about this. And I think that in addition to that, he's also promoted things that undermine the authority of the scripture, like standpoint epistemology. Definitely politically on the left, no question about that. Do you have general thoughts about what the healthiest movement denomination networks are out there right now for individuals and churches to join? That's a hard one. I have a lot of thoughts on this particular question. I can't share them all right now, but I'll say this in brief. I was expecting a lot of alternatives to pop up, and I don't think a lot of alternatives have. And there are reasons for it, but I would check out, it's not for everyone, but check out the IFCA. It's an association that is taking an active steps against social justice. I've heard things about the Fire Network from a pastor out in Nebraska saying it's a good organization to be part of, possibly. Check it out. I don't know. I don't have any really association with them, but that might be a good one. Unfortunately, the Evangelical Free Church really isn't an option in my mind at this point. Some people thought it might be. It's not. The Southern Baptist Convention, obviously, people know where I stand on that. PCA is kind of a mixed bag, but I'll put it this way. If I was in the PCA right now, I might try to fight, but I wouldn't be looking at the PCA as a place I'd join if I was new and looking for good places to join. That would not be an option in my mind, unless you want to just commit your life to political battles instead of doing ministry. And I know there's going to be a certain amount of battle you have to have in you if you're going to do ministry, but how much of time is that going to suck up? That's the big question. Other people are putting other options in here. They're saying G3, the PRC. I'm not exceptionally familiar with the PRC. G3 though is not. It's an association you can kind of have, but I don't look at G3 as there's a network. I know there's a network component to it. I would say that might be a place to look in your local area. If there's maybe some like-minded churches, it might be an option, but it might not be too. It's kind of broad, and it doesn't function as it's a loose affiliation. We'll put it that way. It's a very loose affiliation. Unfortunately, you're not going to get the missions contacts, the things that you would normally expect from a denomination or an association even. I don't know that you're going to get those as much from G3. You could go to a conference and try to network, but whereas like the IFCA, they have they train chaplains. That's what I'm talking about. Like you can actually get your chaplain certification through them. You can they have their own missionaries and that kind of thing. So, So anyway, the other people are Fellowship of Independent Reformed Evangelical Churches. I'm just not familiar. I'm not familiar with that organization. There may be some ones that I'm just not familiar with that are good out there. Sometimes, though, unfortunately, people will tell me, this is a great one. I'll look into it. And I'll be like, did you see all the woke stuff over here? So you just got to be super careful. I'm super careful about putting my name behind something or recommending something because I've been bit before a little bit. I've been burned when I have said this looks good, and I had someone sometimes even in the organization saying how they're taking active steps or they're great, and then I find out later what they've actually been doing, and I'm like, I can't support this organization. So I'm super careful. People also ask me schools, and I'm like, well, Southern Evangelical Seminary has taken steps against wokeness. I don't know of other schools who have taken overt steps. It's seminaries, I should say. Appalachian Bible College seems to be a good college in my mind, because I just know people there who have told me what they're doing in their departments to take steps against social justice. So I'm positive about that. But there's probably good schools out there, but man, I would have to see. I always ask the same question. I say, look, if it's a denomination, a school, whatever, send me their statement against social justice. And normally I don't get an email back, because it's like they don't have a statement against social justice. And I'm like, well, in this day and age, there's going to have to be something in your statement of faith somewhere. There's got to be something to hedge against this corruption. That's actually all right. One last question, then we need to end it. John, do you have any idea when church membership started in church history? Thanks. In the 30 seconds left on this podcast. Well, it's as some people would tell you, it's as old as the apostles. But if you're talking about a formal church membership in which someone takes a class and passes, some kind of a barrier that's created, an intake where you talk to the pastors or whatever, I'm not exactly sure when that would have been implemented, but I'm sure you're talking about hundreds of years. It's not. There may be certain versions of that are more recent, but that idea of vetting people, normally I think baptism would be, in normal societies, that would be the thing. One of the challenges today, and this is why I think church membership has become more of a formal process, is you don't have people living in the same community their whole life. And if you, on a smaller scale, the way the world used to be up until recently, when you had the smaller towns and you had people who grew up in the same town their whole life, when they became a Christian, they went and they got baptized at the local church. You knew who they were. The vetting was already kind of done for you. It's very hard today to vet. And so people have to be more intentional about it. So anyway, any problem with 9 marks? Yes. That's for another podcast though. 9 marks has definitely taken the woke route, unfortunately. And I think we're going to do a podcast here soon where I'm going to go through like the top 10 articles or something on 9 marks website that are not good, but we will do it at some point. Anyway, God bless everyone. I hope that was helpful. I never did talk about my weekend at the county fair, unfortunately, a few hours at the county fair and other stuff, but I'll have to save that. I'll have to save my personal stuff for another time. I know some of you love hearing about that, but unfortunately I have to get to some personal stuff now, working on my house, because my dad is here to help me. So I'm going to have to run, but yes, Lord willing, later in the week, I'll give you some personal update stuff as well.